Welcome, divas and dudes, to Powerhouse Bakery. I'm so excited to have you on this very warm evening. But what we are doing today is something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is to really shed more light on the organ you probably know very little about, or at least the least known organ. And so for the past few weeks, I've been really trying to help us understand not only what it is, where it originates, how do we feed it? How do we fuel it? How does it help us when we help it? It being that huge number, trillions, I think it's 6 trillion cells of bacteria that live in our body. And I heard a funny story, it might have even been from last week's team or class members, that they were giggling when we were talking about really what area of the body we're referring to, which, in a lot of sense, it's the poop, right? Our human refuse is really where this biome is mostly studied. Of course, it's indicative of what's in our GI tract, and so we're now just learning so much about what it'll do for us, and of course, if we feed it well, we have a great outcome. And truly, I think what's important to keep in mind is this living organ absolutely needs to be fed, and then it has metabolites. And so you know this all too well. If you eat too much broccoli and you haven't had broccoli for a while, or beans, and you feel bloated and uncomfortable, that's because your biome is breathing and living and breathing, and its byproducts is giving you gas. And so as we go through this whole study, one of the things that we want to understand is how this biome is living and breathing, and how does it help us in the whole life cycle, meaning in the medical community. Is it going to give us some answers to some of our biggest questions? And for us in this room, one of our biggest questions is, how do we treat disease like cancer? How do we prevent disease like cancer? And so in my last class, we talked a little bit about, where are we in that whole scheme of thinking? Is it prevention or treatment? And so today what I want to do is look at a little bit about how the gut evolves. So before I really delve into how it evolves, I want to take a little back step and talk about where exactly is the biome. So if we do a little drawing here, where does our gut start? You think of it as a tube. It has an entry and an exit to the tube. The first place it's going to start is in the mouth, right? So we eat food, and from the mouth we masticate, so we chew up the food. Where does it go next? First the esophagus, right? And then it goes to the stomach. What's unique about the stomach? Anybody know? Yes, low pH. Very high stomach acid. Any idea what purpose that has? Yeah, it does so much. It literally helps to break apart the bonds in the food. Dissolving would be a good word when we think of acid. Another thing it does is kill a lot of bacteria. I mean, surprisingly, when we eat foods, even if they're a few days past their ideal best by date and you eat them and there might be a few extra bugs in there, our HCl pretty much takes care of it. Because it's so high in acid, it'll kill most things. After the stomach, where does it go? Yes, small intestine. The small intestine is connected to what organ? Pancreas. And of course, the pancreas has a very important little holding tank. What's it called? Gallbladder. Right, and I heard bile, and that's right, because over here the liver is involved too. And so kind of how this works, and believe me, this is hugely shortened my little pictorial representation of the small intestine. One thing that I think is so amazing, especially when I was in college and actually high school and I was learning about all of this, don't quote me on the exacts, but it was something like if we stretch out our intestine from mouth to rectum, how many inches do we have? And it's like enough to go around the world. I mean, this is like amazing number. When you think of all the villi, the microscopic area for digestion and absorption is just profound. But anyway, so we'll make it short like this just for the picture. So we've got our pancreas, and of course it has the gallbladder. How many people still have their gallbladder? Oh, good, okay. Most of us. A couple of us know. So what? The good news is, can we survive without an organ? Yeah. In fact, I just learned about a lady that had her pancreas taken out and her gallbladder and the female organs because they were diseased. And I thought, you must have made a mistake. Nobody can survive without their pancreas. But actually, it sounds like it's true. So the pancreas has a really important role, and that is bringing enzymes into the GI tract. So the enzymes plus the stomach acid come together, and in the duodenum, which is that fancy term for the upper part of the small intestine, is when the digestion begins. So without the stomach acid, we would not have the cascade of events. Now, surprisingly, the stomach acid itself, it goes a little bit into this area that stimulates the gallbladder, but really another big part of what happens is the vagus nerve communicates. So as soon as we start eating, all kinds of communication goes up to our brain and says, all right, team, we've got food coming, so get ready. So it starts to stimulate the pancreas because as soon as something's in our mouth and the food starts going this way, we've got a connection up to the brain that says, okay, get ready, we've got food. And the pancreas is then stimulated to put the digestive enzymes into the gallbladder, which is then secreted into the small intestine. The stomach acid helps to not only neutralize, but also to turn on some of those enzymes. So again, it just works in beautiful concert. After the small intestine, where does it go? Yes, goes into the large intestine all the way down and out. Okay, so when we are talking about the biome, we've got actually several biomes going on. How cool is that? So let's follow that idea of the food again. Right when it goes into the mouth, salivary amylase does something to the first bite that we have, and it starts to break down the sugars. What ends up on our teeth that we don't like? Plaque, right? And that's the first sign of a biome. So in our mouth, the bacteria on our teeth and gums create just the right environment so that that plaque develops. We don't like it on there, so we brush it off. That's the first metabolite. So the mouth is the first place we have a biome. And then go down a little farther, and the second one is over here in our airway. And the airway also has its own biome. So again, every time I do these classes for you guys, I learn more and more stuff. When I was in college, we did not even talk about the biome. It was not, and I know that's dating myself, but it's really in the past 10 years that this has just exploded in understanding. And remember, I'd mentioned a couple of times ago that really what started all of this study is truly when the genome was all identified. We developed technology that allowed us to really, with enough speed and accuracy, to be able to map out all of our genes. That's awesome. So that technology is what really stimulated the secondary use of that knowledge, and that was to look at the biome. Some numbers say that all the cells in our body are like, I want to say 3 trillion. Oops, I've got to put an R in there. And there's like 3.7 trillion cells in the biome. So in the bugs. So there's like literally more cells in our biome than there is in our cells in our body. That's kind of eerie, right? They're just extra tiny. And of course, each of those bacteria have a DNA. And so now we're starting to be able to map out and understand the DNA of the bacteria that's in our biome that helps make our body function. And all of this together is really all about creating symbiosis. What do I mean by that term? Yeah, you working together, just like teams in a business, right? And we have to make sure that it's a win-win, just like in a business. I'm not going to be able to sell my stuff if people don't like it and find it valuable. They're not going to come back and give me the money so that I can keep paying my people to do that. You know how it works. Same thing in the homeostatic environment like our human body. So it's pretty cool that we know it's got to work like this and really make it a symbiotic approach. And so when we start thinking about how all of this works, what we feed our biome is going to be super important. In the last classes, we talked also about kind of, the diversity matters and the volume matters, right? The diversity of what? Yeah, the diversity of the foods help create the diversity of the biome. So as we're creating this internal biome, we know for sure that we have to make sure that the bacteria has as many variety of cells as possible. So I'm going to erase my little picture of the GI tract, and we're going to go to another kind of idea here. And that is kind of a review from last time and maybe the time before, where we talked about when we're born, what impacts our biome. Anybody remember? How we're born, so is it C-section or natural? Right? So if you go through the birth canal, you immediately get exposed to your mother's biome. So that's awesome. Now we're bathed basically in some of these bugs that she has evolved through her life stage to that point. So we know that the way the birth happens. And then what else? Well, a little bit of DNA, so genetics. Some of it we're just born with. And so it happens over time that the DNA maintains some critical components. And so we get born into that. So interestingly, though, when we look at the genetics of biome bugs of people in Texas and people in China, there's quite a few similarities, which is amazing. So it doesn't really help us to understand that region starts to dictate the genetic tendencies. There's something deeper. And so there's a lot we get to learn. So it's really an exciting idea. But we know that diversity is important. So when we're thinking of how to maintain the diversity, and we go back to, okay, we're eating our food, we go back to always our best foods list. Again, this is how we decide what we're going to eat. And you guys have been with me long enough to know that we're always on a continuum to learn better, best, ideal. We're going to learn about what proteins you like, what carbohydrates, what fats, and then we're going to learn how to cook them better. And we're going to talk about the quality of the ingredient, as far as is it organic or how's it grown. Help me here. Which other one? So cooking, quality of the food, the company that it keeps. I'm not going to let you get sleepy now. I'm going to ask you questions. So cooking, quality, and the company that foods keep. So if we're looking for diversity in our biome, chances are we're going to also need diversity in the foods we choose. So when I get somebody that comes in and says, "Oh, Suzanne, just create a menu for me, and I'm not picky. I'll eat the same thing every day, and that won't bother me at all." Yeah, I know, right? You're like, that's me. And it might be simple in the short term, but it's not valuable in the long term. You guys remember my story of the guy in HEB that had all the ground beef and the celery? Yeah, so we're going to talk about him a little bit, but his idea is that he was treating his unhappy gut by taking out the foods that probably caused the gas. So, there's a point where if you aren't careful, you've now created a conundrum. So not having diversity can pigeonhole you into a conundrum so that now your body can't digest those foods very well anymore. So now you got to gradually recreate the enzyme systems. Remember, the pancreas has to put into the system to help digest the foods, and it all starts to flow down that path. So let's just say we're not that guy at HEB that is trying to treat inflammation, and we're really doing prevention, and we're trying to make sure that we feed our gut as healthy as we can. So what will be some protein foods? Any examples? Yeah, chicken, fish. How about edamame? Tofu. How about chia seeds? Yeah. Tempeh, I love it. Yeah, fermented foods is so important. That looks so bad, I have to erase it. Tempeh. So, when we start thinking of these nice varieties of food, in general, what important building blocks do we get from proteins? Yes, amino acids. So these are super important because they give amino acids. There's two that I want to talk about today, tryptophan and tyrosine. So tryptophan and tyrosine. These are two really cool amino acids. I'll spell it out for you since you're going to take notes. Tryptophan. These are two really cool ones because they are so directly related to our neurochemistry. Over the past few weeks, I've kind of alluded to the fact that it's our second brain. We're finding more and more that how our gut feels, how our gut is doing, has a big bearing on how the body is doing, meaning how it's feeling. So if you're depressed and sleepy and lazy and feeling fat and bloated, all those things could really have an impact from what your biome is doing. So there really is a correlation. In fact, funny story, and it's jumping up a little bit, but you'll see how it's coming together. There's a story in one of these research articles where they are doing a test on mice. And they created a strain of mice that had less fear of cats. And then the normal mice that had a lot of fear for cats, because that's part of being a mouse, right? So they had this cat with less fear, and they kept breeding it to get that characteristic more and more. So they have the cat with not very much fear at all for cats. They extracted some of the poop from that mouse. So fecal transplant, poop transplant to the normal mouse that is afraid of cats. And guess what that mouse did? Attacked the cats. It's crazy. And so the mouse model is really good because they're very simple to work with. They have a quick life cycle, so we can kind of evolve the characteristics that we want and then test it against the test group and wow, get some pretty powerful learnings. So we know that there is some truth around how the gut is feeling and, of course, how the human is feeling. So when we look at these amino acids, and tryptophan and tyrosine are really unique because they are so involved in central nervous system hormones. See if you recognize any of these. Serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, you might not know this one as well. And what's the fight or flight? Anybody remember? Epinephrine. So these are just four. I mean, they're looking at a bunch. But one that's really cool, I think I hinted to last time, serotonin. We think of it as a brain chemistry, right? Actually, 10% of our serotonin is made in our brain. 90% made in our gut. Like, wow. So basically we're saying that when our bugs are happy, they make us happy because serotonin is the happy hormone. So serotonin, happy hormone. What about melatonin? Anybody remember that one? Yes. Anybody take melatonin? Yeah. If you're having a hard time sleeping, they've been able to create a synthetic, more or less synthetic melatonin. And so that helps with sleep. Dopamine, sorry. Anybody know what dopamine does? This is the get up and get it done hormone. It gives us energy, drive, enthusiasm, jump up, ready to go. Different than serotonin. Serotonin is like, I'm having such a good time, I'll just do that tomorrow. Right? Dopamine is like, nope, I'm going to make my list, I'm going to clean house, do the windows, cut the grass, and do the sweeping all around the porches. And then I'll have breakfast. I love dopamine. I wish I had that all the time. Yeah. And so it's from these amino acids, and the biome bacteria create these hormones. The vagus nerve connects the, oh, I don't have my picture anymore, I erased it. The vagus nerve connects the brain to the gut, and it's a pathway, a freeway of communication. So just like I mentioned, when we see the food, we see a food, we smell it, we even look at the clock and see that it's 6 o'clock and it's dinner time. The brain already starts sending the messages down to our organs, get ready, because it's time. And probably our ghrelin starts to go up. Ghrelin is the growl, hungry. So we can learn to be hungry at 6 o'clock because our brain has learned that at 6 o'clock we get food. Pavlov's dogs. You remember that story? It's kind of like the classic. We're all old enough, yes. So the dog is trained by the ringing of the bell to start to salivate. And that's because his brain tells the salivary glands, get ready, because we got some chow coming. So much learned. And it's all because the gut is getting ready for dinner. So I love it. So dopamine is go. And then epinephrine is also kind of go, and that's because of almost fear. So it's a little different. You see you sit down at an exam and you realize you studied the wrong chapter, and you just want to run away. That would be that one. I used to describe that when I taught college nutrition. Or, if you are hiking in Big Bend and you see a brown bear and you want to know how fast your legs can really go, you hope that you can put those together and get the heck out. If your brain's not making enough of these neurochemicals because you don't have a varied enough diet, you might not worry enough about that bear that's trying to follow you. So we talked a little bit about the protein category in our best foods list because of these 2 amino acids. There's one other one that I wanted to share, and it's kind of a new one. I'm going to get my notes so I can make sure I spell it properly, because this one is not something I studied in college. It's kind of, as the years go, thank goodness, nutrition and the world of science of nutrition is always evolving. So this one is called indole 3 lactic acid. So if you were to try some Bulgarian yogurt with a little honey, that would be a good example of getting this culture. So we also can think of it as a probiotic. So if you've ever had kefir or kimchi, the cultured products. And what makes these really cool is it's using the environment's bacteria. So now we're bringing the exterior bacteria into us, helping our body now get acclimated to our environment. So now let's back up a little bit and think about the baby. The baby's just born, and we are fortunately going to swab the baby's mouth with some of the birth canal bacteria, so he's going to have all the benefits from mom, but he's not allowed to have a certain something before he's age 1, or maybe it's age 2. I think it's age 1. Do you remember what it is? Honey. Yes. Why do you think they can't have honey as a baby?
They can't process, break it down.
Because there's bacteria in it. And so, I go back to the question of, does our immune system evolve? Our first inclination is, well, it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. We're going to take antibiotics. We're going to eat poorly. We're going to be involved in environmental stresses. All these things are killing our biome, right? We are born with the potential, and it's only downhill from there. Well, the good news is that's not quite true. Our biome does evolve, and we can improve on it to a point. Now, if you go down the path of having a lot of sickness and you have to take a lot of antibiotic, it might be difficult to get your biome back up and going, but there's a chance. Now, with the whole idea of the honey, when the human is strong enough, so they have enough biome and they've been exposed to the environment enough, their biome is going to be able to equip that honey. Honey is really cool because, again, it's using that little insect to inhale and poop and create this wonderful sweetener, right? When we think about it, and you guys know I raise bees, so I'm so fascinated with the whole idea of how these bees have not evolved since, the time began. We know Adam and Eve had plenty of honey, and now we can benefit from this. And in fact, it's even considered a prebiotic. Honey is considered a prebiotic. And that gives us one more good reason to use a little bit of honey when we're trying to add flavor. It's now adding more than just flavor, it's adding some healthy bacteria. So I just thought that was such a nice idea, and we sure do want to have one more reason to enjoy honey. So when we really look at feeding the biome, we know that we want to let it evolve. We want to make sure that we have everything we can from birth, and then feed it well. We've talked a little bit about what it means to feed it well, so just feed it well. When we feed our biome well, it's going to create homeostasis in the host. So the host is us. The biome is, again, we've got one in lots of different spots. As a side, did you know that a tumor cell also has a biome? Crazy, right? So you've got the tumor cell, and it has bacteria, and it's kind of its protection, the bacteria on the outside that again helps it to evolve and keep its barrier out. What's unique about cancer cells versus the human body? Cancer cells do not believe in homeostasis, right? They don't follow any rules. Cancer cells are all in it for themselves. They are going to eat and grow and eat and grow and push everything else out of its way. Normal body cells are always looking for homeostasis. And again, this biome is having so much to do with it. So whatever triggers are on that tumor cell that allows it to have a very selfish propagation is very different than the homeostasis that we're looking for in our body. And I just think it's fascinating, and it doesn't mean that our immune system doesn't get to combat that. Because remember, we've got macrophage and we've got so many different immune cells. So I'll draw that back up. Most of the time, when the human body has been impacted by a tumor cell and we have recognized it, so here's our healthy cell, and it recognizes it and it says, alert, this the host cells are going to create a macrophage and encompass it and kill it. So it recognizes the problem and it soaks it up and kills it. So when our immune system is strong, we've got so many ways to get rid of that. So that's kind of an example of where I want to go with this. So to create homeostasis in our host, we know that the biome has to do something good for it, right? So we've talked about having those hormone systems that help our brain feel happy. What are some of the other ways that we know preventing diseases? We know exercise is good. We know sleep, right? Eating right.
Stress.
Yes, and stress. So low stress. Can't emphasize that enough. And so, that's why, gosh, the melatonin, super important, a natural form of melatonin. When we're in homeostasis, we shouldn't have to go take a pill. Now, some of us are struggling in the fight of our life. So we're not in homeostasis, thank you very much, right? So sometimes we need a little help. But working through all these, it'll get our immune system as healthy as it can. So our immune system is no doubt supported by the biome, not only by the chemicals that it gives us, so chemicals, but also it feeds those immune cells to fight. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about here. Who has heard of the term antioxidants? Of course, yeah, that's not a strange term. So let's review, though, what antioxidants are. Because again, antioxidants can come in food And some of them can even be made as chemicals from the biome. So what would be some examples of antioxidants? Yes, anthocyanin and vitamin C. How about vitamin E? Vitamin A, beta carotene. These are all the ones that, we kind of have known for a long time. And then we get in more of those esoteric terms. So what would that be? Like the phytochemicals. Of course, the anthocyanins, allicin, quercetin. Where does quercetin come from? Red wine. Quercetin. And this has been a topic for a long time. Researchers will say, well, what's better, red wine or white wine or beer, or let's just go for the hard stuff. All kinds of conversation around, what alcohol is going to give us the best bang for our buck in our immune system. Who knows? There's lots of ideas on both sides of that fence. Let's just say that there's belief that in the red grapes that make the wine have a bright color, and so we know for sure that whenever there's a bright color, there's antioxidants to be had. And there's some to say that, if you have a glass of wine here and there, it helps to reduce your stress. In fact, when I've been researching the super old, fascinating. Did anybody follow? There's a YouTube lady, she's a researcher in, I believe it's Minnesota, and she's following this group of super aged, so like in their 90s. What she found was that wine was a commonality, glass a night, not being too thin, exercising very lightly, so not going to the gym and doing your hour and a half or an hour or 45 minutes. Nope, it was 10 to 20 minutes. These things were common in the super aged. What does that tell us then? It tells us that something's working. Their biome is being fed well. It's being taken care of. There isn't a whole lot of this going on to break down the biome. And there's something really good about whatever it is they're doing to their immune system. Now, granted, genetics is going to play a role, but I love telling the story about my dad. He's almost 90. He smoked 3 packs a day for most of his life. He was in the Navy, so he was very active, very fit. But he also drank alcohol. We'll just say more than 1 glass a night. And he has outlived all his friends, and so there's certainly a piece of stress there because, the emotional support is gone. And yet, how did that guy manage to live that long and not follow all the rules? Of course, some genetics, but there was probably something in his biome that really was working for him. And so I just think it's so exciting to see how that whole conundrum starts to really play into this idea of homeostasis. Questions so far? Okay, so what I want to do is think through the whole process. If we know that our biome needs to be fed well, and we know that we have to get good variety, I want us to imagine what that would look like. Because one thing that I think is so important is right now in the stage of our life, prevention is going to be tough. Because we can't turn the clock back, right? We can't go back and change how we were born. We can't go back and eat differently because our moms and dads were serving hot dogs and potato chips, and we said, no, I'm not going to have that. That's bad for my biome. I mean, even when I was in college, we were not learning about biome, right? And so I don't want us to feel like we did something wrong to get a diagnosis of an illness. Because we can only make the best decisions we can each day. But we can start to help paint a new picture for the family members and friends that are around us. And so when we think of avoiding a disease, we know that, of course, feeding it well is important, and we know that exercise. But each each few years, we get a whole new scenario of what exercise should look like. We know that stress management is good. So we want to talk about that a little more detail. And of course, we want to think of the sleep pattern, our social connectedness, emotional, and intellectual. So how do we get all of those pieces really wrapped into our idea of wellness? Because the good news is our gut biome is going to benefit even today doing something a little different. So taking out the external potential toxins that we know help make it harder for the biome to survive. So that would be like what? Smoking, being around toxic chemicals. So if you're going to put, Raid on the ant pile, think twice about how that's going to get into the environment. What are some natural ways to get rid of ants? Does our gardener know?
You can use nematodes.
Yeah, I knew it. And can't you put like lemon juice, or there's some kind of citrus?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Nematodes.
Nematodes, that works for me. Well, and so, even just a few years ago, I personally would have just dumped a whole bunch of that chemical on the ant pile and not thought twice about it. Now I do, because it has an impact on our world. Yeah, boric acid, that's another good one. So, what I want us to think of is with prevention and treatment. We know that there's some really cool things happening with treatment. Again, if we look at the whole idea around the healthy biome, we're looking at people that are cancer-free in late stages of life. What does their biome look like? Wouldn't it be cool to be able to have the right nomenclature to break down all of their biome, look at their DNA, and go, that's the secret bullet? Maybe someday we're going to get to do that. Even today, they're doing the fecal transplant. So they're able to take out the biome of a healthy person and put it into somebody that has Crohn's disease, irritable bowel, some chronic problems, and they are getting healed. In the earlier class, people asked the really good question, how do they do that? How do they take poop from one person and put it in another? That sounds just ridiculous. And, I thought it was sweet. They wanted to know. But basically, it's very scientific. It's not like, you have to even know the person. The people that are doing the donation have a way to capture their sample in a cup. And then it's given to the lab, and the lab puts it into a syringe, and it's inserted rectally. So now it's engaged into your biome, and the bacteria now help to normalize that homeostasis. Because again, we always want to have diversity, and we want to have volume. So when we think of these things, we're always looking at how do we do both of those. So if you are eating a prebiotic, you're adding diversity because it's different bugs in the jar. So if you were to have a Bulgarian yogurt, it's going to have a lot of certain bacteria, and hopefully that's going to help your diversity. Why there's been so much problem is that doctors are jumping forward and trying to create their ideal pill or potion that has some healthy bacteria in it, and it causes all kinds of problems in your biome because it is exactly not what you needed. We weren't able to look into, the problem and say, oh, you needed this one and this one and this one, bacteria that is. It's really just a dump in, hope for the best. And they're changing that now because they're able to map out the biome and really understand the genetics. So there is going to be probably a day when we are going to not only take some of the healthy person's biome, or of course their fecal transplant, and help people that have that disease. But another thing that's probably going to happen is when we're a certain age, so maybe 15 or maybe it's 20, we're going to bank some of our healthy bacteria. So part of a preventative measure will be, you check your blood, make sure you don't have a PKU allergy, which is done on babies. Remember, they prick their heel. And, oh, by the way, let's save some of the baby's poop. And it might be as early as 3 weeks old. It might be when they're teenagers, whenever they're healthy and they have kind of this peak of the healthiest biome. And then we're going to put it into a freezer and save it. How crazy, right? So that when you're now, in your 50s and you're struggling with some sort of imbalance, remember homeostasis got off whack. That guy at HEB thought, I'm going to fix my problem. I'm just going to eat meat. Instead, he could go to his clinic, get some of his healthy biome from years gone by, have that put in. You don't have to share anybody's now. You get your own. And it theoretically will help to create homeostasis again in their biome, and everything will be kumbaya. So I feel like that is really real. It's becoming out of the theory and into the clinics. And so, I don't know how far away we are, but we're getting there. And so it's really cool. So prevention versus treatment. When we think of treatment, that's the really crazy stuff about, changing somebody's bacteria and biome by borrowing from someone else. So that's coming. But the prevention part is something we can do at every stage of the game, whether it be adding honey as a prebiotic or starting to eat more variety of vegetables, because again, that's going to make the biome survive better. So we don't just give it a meat diet. What's really key is that when we eat a homogeneous diet, think back on the pancreas. When we eat a homogeneous diet, the pancreas doesn't have to make so much enzymes to break down vegetables. Instead, pancreas goes, all right, I got you. I'll just do all the peptidases, the enzymes that break down protein. And then all of a sudden you decide to get healthy and you eat a big bowl of broccoli. Oh, well, you have gas, right? Because your gut was like, wait a minute, that's not on the menu. I was not expecting that at all. And so then people that try to get healthy and overdo it feel like, okay, broccoli and I do not get along. I'm never going to eat it again. And people that are trying to eat vegetables have it all wrong. I'm just going to go back to my ground beef and celery diet. What we need for them to do is gradually change. The other thing that's really cool is that we have a way to train the enzyme systems to be more robust, and the biome will respond. So when we think about the whole idea around variety, that is key. So if we train the bacteria and our enzyme systems to have an all meat diet, that's not going to be good. If we train our bacteria to have more fats, that's not going to be good. So the variety is the key. And again, I talked a little bit about exercise. Anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes, even if it's just 3 to 4 times a week, is awesome. The other thing is, we've heard that sitting is the worst thing you could do. And so if you have a job that requires you to sit a lot, try standing. And then every once in a while, you got to do a few moves, and you realize that it's keeping your body up, and the value of gravity against all of our muscles are also making us work. Stress, of course, super important. So we talked a little bit about this in the past too. If you've never tried a yoga class, use your Diva classes to really get exposure to a different style of class. It's so amazing when you start thinking about ways to focus on breathing, focus on meditation. So whether you're praying or you're just focusing on how your elbows and your shoulders and your ankles feel, that allows this whole break of the cycle of some of those unhappy hormones that are floating around that could be as a result of our not so healthy diet. So it gets you in a new cycle. And of course, the sleep we talked about, and creating a good sleep environment. What do we mean by that? You've heard sleep hygiene. Dark room. What else?
Cool.
Yes, if it's even possible.
Like
Yes.
30 minutes or an hour or something.
Yes. Sometimes people really want a weighted blanket. I don't know how you do that in Texas in the summer. Get your AC down really low. But yeah, so all those pieces. And again, the meditation so that your mind's not racing. And we allow there to be some ways to kind of bathe our nervous system, both up here and down here, in a sense of peace. And it really does break the cycle. Before I forget, I wanted to go up to another diet section. I had a question earlier about what snack foods can we put on our best foods list. And I talked about the Dorito chip a few times. I think some of you might know that when I was in college, I spent an entire quarter on the Dorito chip. Do you remember what we learned? Fascinating, yes, fascinating culmination of food cocaine. They studied it forever. The amount of salt, fat, sweet, crunch. Do you think in that Dorito chip we find the tryptophan, tyrosine, or the indoles? No. They're so refined. All of those good stuff is gone. The proteins in the grains are gone. So that becomes a stressor when we start using snack foods as a part of our diet. So, of course, in the scheme of things too, when we are exposed to other stresses like illness and we take antibiotics, that also hurts our diversity. And we knew this probably, I would say at least 20 years ago. We knew that antibiotics were being overused. And I think I told you, even as a kid, I was afraid of getting acne. So my mom's like, oh, let's just give you tetracycline. It's like, wow. So that hurt my biome for sure. But the idea is, if we start thinking about how to reverse things, we can in a very hopeful way. So let me go back to that, and we'll just end with giving us a list of things that really are perfect. Eat this, not that. Yeah. So if we're going to try to improve our biome, and we are working with the best foods list, how would we guide somebody? So again, we're going to be the wise sage that says, do what I say, not what I do, because we can't go back in time, right? We're going to talk to our kids and maybe nieces and nephews. We could even say, do this, not that. How would we paint that picture? Well, we know for sure we want to avoid weight gain. We want to avoid weight gain. So that stops all kinds of inflammation, that cascade of problems that happens with weight gain. So again, we're trying to help people see forward. And how are we going to do that? We're going to watch our portion sizes of our best foods. So portion matters. Are we going to tell them that any food is one to stay away from? Which ones? Doritos.
Doritos.
So refined, right?
Yes, processed foods. Yeah.
Refined flour.
So portion is king. I'm working with a young guy, 18, and he's grown up on this. And he's like, what? I can't have any? And we say, well, it's really a matter of portion. And gradually what happens is that whole idea of food cocaine, your body and your taste buds do start asking for different foods. You guys have known that, right? You can tell. And so what's really cool is when this is your goal, you end up getting a decrease in inflammation because of the foods that you're picking. So decreased processed foods is less stress on the body. If we think of exercise, there's always a goal in mind. So if we think of, is there exercise for fitness and maybe even competition? There's a stage of life where that's awesome. We want to encourage that, or wellness. Because also, when we think of joint swelling, other immune or inflammation responses, we know of arthritis, we might have thin skin, older folks might scar easy or have blisters easy. We wouldn't want them to have the same fitness plan as somebody that was young. And so we definitely want to make it specific to their goal. Definitely getting goal specific. And the good news is it can be around 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be super hard. Coming from a sports dietitian, I think it's so exciting that I can tell my age range a more specific goal to work towards. So, what about medicines? We know that medicines always have a side effect. And so we're learning that from the antibiotics. So what would you tell your kids and, the next generation? It would be, first try home remedies. First look at food. What could you do with your food before you go straight to a medicine? So if you have somebody that is depressed, and I learned this when I went through a divorce and I went to my doctor and said, I need drugs, I'm so unhappy. Said, no, you don't. Go work out and eat healthy, get some sleep, and you'll be fine. I was like, oh, okay. And I did. So it means that not in every case, but our culture always thinks that we need to go straight to the doctor, get a pill. And when I started doing this research, I love that several of these folks that I was following look back on history. I mean, who said food is thy medicine? Who said that? Socrates. It's pretty cool. Way back in when? When did he live? 1300s? A long time ago. And so before they even knew about anything, I mean, it's just been 20 years since I've been in college and we're learning a ton. He didn't know anything about modern medicine, but they knew that there was something about food that had a profound effect on different people. Another researcher was looking at understanding the inside of people, and he gave these drinks to people and couldn't figure out why it was making some of them sick and some of them were perfectly fine. It was like a bacteria drink, and he gave it to one person, he keeled over, got really sick. He took it himself, he was fine. It's like, wait a minute, there's individual differences. Why is that? And it's not just because one came from Texas and one came from China, or one was 10 and one was 50. There was something about the biome or something about the individual that we couldn't see. And so that to me is super exciting. So we know that food can do a lot for us. If we think of processed foods, let's go back up to that a little bit. We can also think of homemade foods, and we kind of get in a rut sometimes about types of foods. I was saying earlier that I have clients that'll say, oh, just tell me what to eat and I'll eat the same thing all the time. I was with some family last weekend and I made lentils. And of course, it's in the middle of summer and we were in Houston and they're like, what? No. We don't eat lentils until November. And I'm like, well, why not? It sounds good to me. So I added a bay leaf. I added some tomato. We had some okra from their garden and some fresh tomatoes. So I cooked up the lentils and then I made kind of a cold salad. It wasn't chilled, but it wasn't hot by any stretch. Put it on a bed of greens, had the tomato and the sauteed okra, and it was delicious, but it was so unusual. And so, sometimes thinking outside the box. Because so often our current families are in the mainstream, so they don't really even think about what can we do. We just follow the easiest path, which is into the fast food lane, on their way to soccer, on their way to all these different events. And so sadly, our culture has put so much emphasis on being busy that sometimes we lose the importance of being slow and allowing there to be some time at home to think outside the box, to make foods that aren't processed, to enjoy the food in and of itself, and not feel like we have to be so fit that we're ready to compete, even if we're in our 50s. All of this becomes a great way to decrease stress and inflammation. And all of that now is going to nurture our biome so that as we're evolving from infant to senior, our biome is actually evolving with us and giving us so much more robust capability to feed those good hormones and to feed our immune system and, of course, metabolize those vitamins and minerals. Okay? Questions?
So can you get the microbiome evaluated?
I know.
Microbiome evaluated?
There is a gentleman here in the medical center area, one of the physicians, is doing it. And there's a couple on the East Coast. So I will share those with you. I think it's the wave of the future. I mean, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but it's very likely that there'll come a time in our lifetime, for sure in our kids, where we're going to go to the clinic for our annual physical. We're going to get our blood pressure. We're going to get our height and our weight, because we want to avoid this. And we're going to have our poop checked to see what our biome's like. And then I had a lady in earlier, Diva. She had BRCA in her background, the gene for breast cancer. So just in case she had a double mastectomy, she didn't even want to have a chance of getting it. And now, if we know that that runs in the family and the kids are, instead of 42 getting a double mastectomy, we have a whole prescription of what to really focus on for this family when they're 4 instead of 40. Those genes are not going to be the destiny. And so that's where I feel like the science is going, and we're going to have so many opportunities. We know for sure the biome has an impact on diabetes. Again, all around this. When the biome is out of balance and there's excess weight, inflammation causes the gut biome to get out of balance. Great question. Anything else? All right.
Who's the person who does the podcast?
I'll send them to you. There's several that I'm following. The TED Talks has them. So you could even on YouTube type in biome and cancer, and all these great topics come up. And they're all new. I mean, I just followed 2 that are from 2020, 2019, and the one about the mice and the mice that, chase the cat is very recent. And so there's young scientists out there that are just ready to rock and roll on this subject. And so I love to get to share it with you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.